All right, everyone, hell hasn't frozen over, so this is just more proof that Trump's 4th of July speech really sort of did it. Hit all the marks that he needed to hit and was basically, I mean, as far as Trump goes, one for the ages, I suppose. CNN, link in the description, archived, of course. Even CNN's analysis was that it was a good speech. That it sort of blindsides the left because they were all expecting it to be hyper-political. Like, imagine being like, you're the CEO of CNN or something, and you've said, well, we're not going to air the Trump speech because it's going to be divisive and political, and this is the 4th of July, and for some reason this holiday that's about people taking up arms against their own government over gun control and excessive taxation, it's not a political holiday. No, it has nothing to do with that. By the way, the one thing that peeved me about Trump, and this is a continuous facet of when they make speeches, is Trump too refers to people rising up against the British. They were British citizens at the time. They were British subjects. They were rising up against their own government. It's important to understand just because you declare independence doesn't make you independent. They had to fight for it. At the time, they were still recognized as British citizens. They were fighting their own troops and their own government that their excessive taxation, oddly enough, actually supported. And that's what the revolution was really about. It was a revolution against their own tyrannical government. Something that should happen more in this world, I think. But even CNN praising the speech, my goodness, to get CNN, on Trump's best day, CNN will give him half-hearted praise at most for something minor before then unleashing a tidal wave of things that they hate about him. With this one, it was almost unqualified, though. It's like, wow, no, it was not political, and he was well-spoken, and other than a few verbal gaffes, which is true. Like, for instance, at one point he was talking about the Continental Army storming airports, and it's fairly clear that a drop of water or something on the teleprompter made their ports look like airports. Now, he's giving a teleprompted speech. He's not sitting there trying to think through every fucking line, because if you're doing that, you're not delivering a good speech. That's the whole point of a teleprompter. Either someone had put a typo on there, or it was water on the screen, or it glitched out or something. It's not a big deal, though, and Trump has come out and explained that it was indeed a glitch. It was very funny to see that be like the big takeaway from like the MSNBCs and the BuzzFeeds. Oh, ha ha, Trump is poorly spoken because he made a mistake. I would challenge anybody, any single individual at BuzzFeed or MSNBC or any of these other groups. Stand up in front of 1 million or so people and give an hour-long speech even with a teleprompter and try not to make a single mistake. They won't be able to do it by and large. And that's with a teleprompter fucking telling you what to say. No, they would stumble over their words. Or they would be wooden and robotic looking and it wouldn't look natural. It's like there's a reason that I don't use notes when I'm making these videos. If I were to read from notes, I'd be pausing and I'd be making mistakes. It wouldn't be as good. There wouldn't be any flow there. I prefer to speak in this manner just with spontaneity, because even if I go off the rails and rant sometimes, it doesn't really make a difference. I thought that Trump did an excellent job, though. It was probably the best speech so far of his presidency. I have to imagine that it helps with some of those center-right voters that have been kind of shaky in their support of Trump, because a lot of times I think they assume that he is actually unhinged. Part of that's by design. He's trying to project an unhinged image for foreign policy reasons, like with trade wars and stuff like that, to prevent our enemies from attacking us or dicking around with tariffs. It makes sense to use the Kissinger strategy. That's why very early on in his presidency, he was meeting with fucking Henry Kissinger. He did that for a reason. He didn't do that out of the blue to say, oh, I've always wanted to meet this dude who almost blew up the world. It seems like a good idea to me, so I'm going to go and have a meet and greet. This totally won't alienate any of my fans that are like, flighty and easily black-pilled. Of course it did, but it was a calculated effort. Oh, he wanted it to be very visible when he was meeting with Kissinger, for very good reasons. CNN gives Trump... How many stories has CNN released since Trump's presidency began, or even back when he was campaigning? How many stories there have been actually positive about anything that Trump has done? Not very many. Only a very small number. You could probably count on your fingers how many stories in the last 2 years have been positive about Trump from CNN specifically. Whether it's, on the news itself, like the cable news, or whether it's on their half-assed website. You can probably count it on your fingers. And this is probably the most positive one that they've released. Maybe this is a harbinger of Scott Adams' prediction that parts of the legacy media would start stumping for Trump simply because they're terrified he could actually lose, and then they would, they'd lose their free lunch, so to speak. What else are they going to talk about that's going to whip people up into a frenzy? Be funny watching him try to get something else to get people into a fake outrage mob. It'd be funny to see all the pearl clutchers get totally exhausted because Trump's no longer there. Like, I mean, even if he wins re-election, you're just kicking the can down the road 4 years before you probably have some boring neo-lib or neocon president that will undo some of the progress Trump has made. We're in a brief golden period before we probably sink back into, Bush-Obama bullshit. Hopefully it saves our nation, a lot of trouble down the road. But the fact is that we might not get a populist Republican or a populist Democrat the next time around. It's funny to see them try to label Warren a populist. I'm sitting there chuckling my ass off. I'm like, yes, you can't be a populist and a globalist at the same time. You can't be an open borders populist. It's impossible, because that's another way of saying you're just a globalist, a neoliberal. But CNN is literal fake news. To see them actually praise Trump, it's like topsy-turvy day. This is a sort of thing that happens only once in a very, very rare time. Trump must have read this and chuckled, because he's like, oh, finally. So finally I managed to do something that didn't, that they couldn't really, pick apart and find anything wrong with. And the people that are talking about his verbal errors, like, it's just sour grapes at that point. It just looks petulant. I'm not saying the far left doesn't look childish anyway, but extra childish. Like, they've regressed from 10-year-olds to 7-year-olds or something. They've gotten even more infantile and whiny. That's about all. Peace out.